The sun seemed to have been placed there on purpose, just to punish the earth with its fire. It was one of those days when even snakes sought shade, and the sky, so blue, seemed to mock those who tried to survive in that vast expanse of dust. In the middle of the Arizona desert, between dry hills and dying bushes, an unlikely figure appeared. A young woman walking alone, wearing a bright red dress, her bare feet bruised by the hot sand, and a look that oscillated between panic and stubbornness. She seemed to have come out of a dream or a mistake. No one in their right mind would walk that route alone, especially not dressed like a ballroom lady. But she wouldn't stop. Her dress, although beautiful, was dirty, torn at the edges, and stuck to her body with sweat. Her loose hair flew in the scorching wind, and her eyes, oh, her eyes. They were like contained storms, hiding too many stories for such a young girl. When she finally fell to her knees in the middle of the trail, it was the sound of hooves that woke her back to reality. A horseman was approaching, slowly, with the posture of someone who hid more than he was telling. He stopped a few meters away and dismounted with almost theatrical care. His wide hat hid half of his face, and his clothes, although made of leather, didn't look like those of a real cowboy. They were too clean, too neat. He knelt down beside the girl and simply said, "Are you alive?" She tried to answer, but her voice wouldn't come out. The man pulled out a canteen and brought it to her mouth. "Slowly, don't swallow it all at once." The water ran down like relief and torture at the same time, bringing tears to her eyes. It was at that moment that he noticed that dress. He recognized it from somewhere. She didn't ask who he was, and he didn't ask why she was there. For now, there was only thirst, exhaustion, and a moment of mercy. Carefully, he lifted her onto his horse, and they rode to an old, abandoned shelter nestled among the rocks, far from the road. The wind rustled through the cracks in the wood, and the silence was thick. As she fell asleep, he watched her. Something about her stirred a restlessness he couldn't name, and deep down, he knew that neither of them were who they seemed to be. Share this story to reach further, subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. I will be very happy to read each comment. While she slept, the man got up and walked outside. He took off his hat, ran his hand over his face, and muttered to himself, "What am I doing?" Because deep down, he wasn't what she thought he was. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a real cowboy. He was just an imposter, wearing borrowed clothes, living a name that didn't belong to him. But that night, maybe for the first time, he felt more real than he had ever felt before. The man who was now caring for that injured young woman was called, at least at that moment, Cole Travis, or so said the name tag hanging from his coat. But Cole was not Cole. His name had been stolen from an unconscious stranger. His documents had been found in a forgotten bag in a border boarding house. No one knew his real name anymore. He was a man with no fixed past, no clear direction, who lived off bets, petty scams, and invented identities. He carried too many stories in his eyes and not enough truths in his soul. Over the past few years, he'd moved through small towns like a warm wind. He'd enter without fanfare, gain your trust with his winning smile, and then disappear before the lie could be revealed. He was a survivor, not a hero. And this desert was just another escape after a botched card game in El Paso. He hadn't expected to find anyone here, and certainly not anyone like her. The girl in the red dress sleeping in the corner of the cabin was the first reminder in a long time that he still had a heart, even if it was hidden under layers of lies. That early morning, he sat by the dead fire, watching the moon as it timidly appeared between the clouds. The questions burned like embers. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why did that dress seem so familiar? It wasn't just the color or the fabric. It was the cut, the shine, and the vague memory of having seen it in a lit-up window of a saloon in Santa Rosa. The girl who wore it was known for her charms and her dancing. They said she would charm men with her eyes and then disappear with their belongings soon after. It all seemed like history. But what if it was her? As the sun began to rise, painting the sky orange and gold, Cole re-entered the cabin and found the girl awake. She looked at him warily but without fear. "Who are you?" she asked. He hesitated, then said, "Cole Travis. And you?" She hesitated too. "Call me May." A short, direct name. But her eyes said, "That's not my real name either." They were now tied. Two pretenders crossing paths in the middle of the desert. Two strangers pretending to be someone until they figured out how to stop running. He helped her up. She was limping, but she insisted on staying on her feet. "I have to go. If they find me, it will be worse." He grabbed her arm and said firmly, "Don't go anywhere like this. Stay here, just one more day." And for the first time, May gave in. For the first time, she allowed herself to trust. And there, in the midst of so many lies, something began to emerge that neither of them expected. A strange, silent alliance. The desert heat was relentless, but inside that cabin, another kind of fever was beginning to burn. That of two strangers learning to breathe in the same silence. May and Cole, or what was left of the fake names they used, began to share more than just space. It was a tense coexistence made up of prolonged glances, interrupted sentences, and mutual distrust, but also of a growing curiosity, as if each saw in the other a blurred reflection of their own soul. During the day, Cole would go out to fetch water and wood, while May tended to the wounds, wrapping cloths around their feet and tying their hair with pieces of rope. She watched his every move with watchful eyes. Not because of attraction, not yet, but because of the fear that this was all a trap. After all, the world had already taught her that men who appear out of nowhere in the middle of the desert are almost never blessings. But Cole was different. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pressure her. He didn't touch her without permission. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, to feel respected after so long being treated like a bargaining chip. It confused her. And little by little, her armor began to give way in places where she didn't even know it still hurt. On the second night, as the fire crackled low, May finally asked, "Have you ever lied so much that you forgot who you really are?" Cole took his time answering. He looked into the fire, scratched his stubble and said, "I remember being a good person, once, but it was too long ago." She nodded silently. It wasn't just any confession. It was a silent plea for forgiveness. And she understood, because she carried the same burden. Deep down, May was also made of scars and bad choices, and she knew the weight of wanting to erase her own history. Over time, details began to slip around the edges of the lie. May revealed that she worked in a saloon in Santa Rosa, where beauty was currency and silence was a shield. The red dress had been borrowed, or stolen as they called it, but she had worn it to run away, not to seduce. There was a debt, a threat, and a desperate attempt to escape the city where the walls had too many ears. She hadn't planned the desert. She had just run. And she had ended up there, in the arms of fate, or perhaps of an imposter who seemed more sincere than any man she had ever known. Cole listened to it all with his eyes downcast. He didn't judge. He didn't react. He just listened, because he knew what it was like to run aimlessly. He knew the taste of shame, the weight of fear, the silence of a life lived in hiding. And that night, when May fell asleep propped up on a pile of hay, he lay there watching and thought for the first time, what if I stopped running? What if, for her, I tried to be real? The next morning, May woke up to the smell of weak coffee and dry bread. Cole was waiting for her, sitting at the door of the cabin, looking at the horizon as if he were expecting someone. And then he said, almost in a whisper, "They're coming." Her eyes widened. "How do you know?" He sighed. "Because I know the type, and because I was once one of them too." And there, their lie began to cease to exist. Because when danger approaches, the masks fall, and only what is true remains. The red dress, now faded and torn, hung in the corner of the cabin like a battle flag. It was a reminder of what May had left behind, and what still haunted her. But to Cole, the dress represented more. He no longer saw just the woman who wore it, but the fight she carried. Her eyes, once filled with distrust, now reflected something new: courage. Not the heroic courage of the fairy tales, but the quiet courage of those who choose to live, even after being reduced to nothing. They knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. Someone would come. May's debt, Cole's secrets, they all had an expiration date. And the desert, though vast, didn't hide anyone for long. So that morning, they decided together that they would head for the nearest town. "Silver Rock," Cole said. 3 days on horseback if we stay off the main trail." May didn't hesitate. "Let's go." Because now she wasn't running alone, and that made all the difference. On the trip, their conversations became more frequent, more intimate. May talked about the music she listened to in the saloon, the customers who treated her like a doll, the dreams she left buried behind the bar. Cole, for his part, revealed that he had been raised by an abusive father, and that from an early age, he had learned that lying was safer than being honest. "Lying protected me, but it also erased me," he said, his eyes lost in the landscape. May placed her hand over his. "So let's light you up again." At night, when they stopped to rest, they shared blankets, silences, and stories. It was strange for both of them to trust. Strange, but necessary. Because the road exposes, the dust sticks to the soul and reveals the cracks. And it was there, among the rocks and the winds, that Cole realized that May was not just a saloon girl. She was so much more. She was someone who had survived a world made to destroy her. Someone who carried dignity even in her rags. Someone for whom he could stop running. On the third day they reached the outskirts of Silver Rock. It was a small town but a busy one. And unfortunately for them, someone was already waiting for them. A short man with a thin mustache and a snake-like gaze. The debt collector. He recognized May at once. Well, look who got the courage." She backed away, but Cole stepped forward. "She doesn't owe anything anymore, it's over." The man laughed. "You think that's how it works, cowboy?" But Cole, for once, didn't hesitate. "I may not be a cowboy, but today, I'm what she needs." And there, on the edge of town, where dust and decision met, Cole's lie finally became the truth. He chose to stay. He chose to protect. And May, with her dress torn and her eyes as steady as ever, knew that even in a dirty world, there was still someone capable of being a real man. Night fell heavily over Silver Rock. The sky, once clear, was now covered in dense clouds, as if nature itself sensed what was to come. Cole and May managed to hide in the back of the old stable of the abandoned hotel, a forgotten place that smelled of moldy hay and longing for better times. With some dry firewood and an old lighter, they made a small fire, enough to chase away the cold in their souls. There, sitting side by side, they began to talk, not like fugitives, but like people trying for the first time to be truly seen. May hugged her knees, staring into the fire with distant eyes. "When I was little, my mother used to say I'd be a star, that I'd shine on a stage in Chicago with beautiful dresses and standing ovations." Her voice was calm, but full of pain. "But my mother died young, and all that was left was a drunken, violent man. I ran away when I was 15 and fell straight into the saloon. I shone, yes, but in the dark of the wrong men's eyes." Cole didn't answer right away. He just reached out, lightly touching her fingers. "And yet, you still shine." She looked at him with teary eyes. For the first time, someone had seen her pain and not turned it into guilt. "What about you?" she asked. "When was the moment you decided you didn't deserve the truth anymore?" Cole took a deep breath. "I think it was when my father left me tied up in a stable for 3 days because I stole food. I was 8. After that, every lie saved me a little more." His voice trailed off. "One day I realized I no longer remembered who I was before I lied." The silence between them was more sincere than any words. And in that pause, a man's wound and a woman's soul met. With the fire already low, May approached. Not out of physical desire, but out of a need for human warmth, for presence, for healing. Cole received her in his arms with respect, and there in each other's arms they spent hours in silence. The world outside might be falling apart, But inside that precarious shelter, two lives were beginning to rebuild themselves, slowly, like someone learning to breathe again after years of drowning in silence. Before he fell asleep, Cole looked into her eyes and said, "You're not a saloon girl. You're everything they could never erase." And May, with a smile that mixed weariness and faith, replied, "And you, maybe you're not an imposter. Maybe you were just waiting for someone to see you whole." And so, under the overcast sky, they slept. Not as fugitives, but as survivors ready for the next battle, and she would come at dawn. The next day began with a dull clack of hooves hitting the hard earth. Cole woke first, feeling his instincts kick in before his eyes even opened. He pulled May carefully, guiding her behind the haystacks. Outside, 3 armed horsemen circled the area. The man with the thin mustache, the tax collector, was among them. "Search everything. The bitch is here, I can feel it." His voice was low, but each word carried the venom of someone unwilling to leave without his prey. May held her breath. Cole held her hand tightly. This truth that was reaching them was inevitable. They waited in silence. Sweat dripped, not from the heat, but from fear. One of the thugs entered the stable, looked around, kicked over a few buckets. Cole prepared to attack if necessary, even though he knew he probably wouldn't make it out alive. But fate, or maybe luck, protected them. The man left grumbling, and soon the 3 riders mounted again, disappearing on the path back to town. When everything went silent, May fell to her knees. She wasn't crying, she wasn't screaming, she was just shaking. Because knowing someone is chasing you, it's an invisible prison, and she was tired of running. Cole helped her up. "We're going to get out of here, but this time, we're not going to hide. We're going to face it." She looked at him, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "What if they kill you?" He smiled sadly. "Then at least I died trying to be someone real." And that sentence hung in the air like a promise, like a last chance, like a beginning. They went to the town sheriff, an old man with a white mustache and a firm voice. Cole told them everything, the disguise, the lies, the past. He expected to be arrested, but the sheriff just listened, crossed his arms and said, "There's a lot wrong in this town, and maybe it's time someone cleaned it up." May then told him about the saloon, the men who threatened her, the names, the schemes, the courage that seemed impossible sprouted with Cole's presence by her side, and the sheriff, surprisingly, believed him. That same afternoon, wanted posters went up around town. For the first time, it wasn't May who was being hunted. It was the collector. It was the gang. It was the real dirt hiding in the dark corners of the saloon. And the news spread like wildfire. The girl in the red dress now had a voice. And beside her, there was a man who had chosen the truth. A man who, even though he was an imposter, was now someone worthy of trust. That night, Silver Rock didn't sleep, and Cole and May, for the first time in a long time, didn't either. But not out of fear, but because they knew, from that moment on, their lives would change forever. Silver Rock looked different when dawn broke. The streets, once dominated by whispers and sidelong glances, were now filled with curious eyes and sharp tongues. Everyone wanted to see the unfolding of the story that no one would believe if it were told outside of the place. The girl from the saloon, the one in the red dress, now faced her attackers with her head held high. Cole, by her side, was no longer an imposter. He was the man who had done the impossible, stood up even though he had no proper ground to stand on. The trial took place not in a courthouse, but in the town square, with the sheriff presiding and the people serving as the moral jury. May told everything, the threats, the men who charged more than money, the secrets behind the saloon facade. Each word was a blade cutting through years of silence, and when it was over, the silence was absolute. No one could ignore the strength of this woman who had been reduced for so long to a flashy dress and a look. Cole spoke up too. He confessed that he was not Cole Travis, that he was using a false name, that he had lied out of fear. But his honesty in that moment redeemed him more than any signed paper. "I lied, yes, but I lied to live, only now. I live by the truth it carries." The town was divided. Some wanted him arrested. Others, inspired by his courage, applauded him. But the sheriff brought the hammer down. Men who hide out of fear are many, but men who reveal themselves out of love are few. He stays. The culprits were arrested. The saloon owner, the thugs, and the conductor were led away in handcuffs to booze. Silver Rock began to cleanse its own wounds, and in the center of it all was May, standing, breathing deeply, free. Cole stared at her as if he never wanted to look away. He hadn't saved her. She had saved herself and given him the chance to do the same. That night, the city had a party. Modest but sincere, May was called to sing, and her voice, hoarse from the desert and from life, moved everyone. Cole watched her from afar, with full eyes. There, among hanging lanterns and children's laughter, the girl in the red dress no longer carried a weight, and the man with no name finally began to have one. The old saloon, once vibrant and corrupt, was now empty, closed for an indefinite period. May walked alone into the building that had been a prison disguised as a palace for so long. She walked between the dusty tables, touched the counter with her fingers, and closed her eyes for a moment. The echo of the false laughter and heavy footsteps still lived there, but now they no longer hurt her. The pain was still there, but it had another name: past. Cole walked in soon after, silently. He saw her standing there motionless, as if deciding whether to leave or stay. "Do you want to leave all this behind?" he asked. May looked around, took a deep breath, and said, "I want to change this." His answer came with a discreet smile. "Then let's change it, together." And in that moment, they were not two fugitives. They were builders of something new, there, where everything had fallen apart. Within days, the old saloon had become a haven, not for drinking, but for meeting. A place where women could sing without fear, where stories could be told truthfully, and where Cole, now using his real name Thomas, played his guitar in the evenings. May sang, but with a different voice. A free, strong voice that came from the heart and pierced the soul of those who listened. Silver Rock was no longer the city of sins. Little by little, it was becoming the city of new beginnings. And it all started with a man who lied to survive and a woman who dared to run away. The red dress now hung in a frame, a symbol of resistance, not of seduction as before, but of liberation. May and Thomas slept without fear now, without having to pretend. And every night, before turning out the light, she would hug him and say, "Thank you for lying, because that was the only way the truth found us." And he would answer, "Thank you for running away, because it was your running away that brought me back to myself." A time passed like a warm breeze through the hills of Silver Rock. The old desert, once a scene of escape and lies, now bore witness to something rare in the Old West: healing. May and Thomas, now free of false names, invisible prisons, and old fears, built a new way of life, made of slow steps, small truths, and gestures that needed no words. The ranch where they now lived was on the edge of town, surrounded by wildflowers and gentle horses, as if the land itself wanted to protect them. They didn't talk about happily ever after. They knew life didn't follow fairy tale scripts, but each day was lived as a gift, as a reminder that it wasn't too late to start over. May, now respected and admired, began teaching other women how to sing, how to sew, and most of all, how to say no. And Thomas, well, he stopped running away. He began to wear his name with pride, to build furniture, to teach children to ride horses. And every night, he picked up his old guitar and played the songs May had written from the scars of her past. One day, while they were fixing the fence in the pasture, Thomas stopped, looked at her and said, "You saved me, not from the desert, not from men, but from myself." May smiled, wiping the sweat from her forehead, and replied, "You saved me too. You saved me from the idea that I didn't deserve love." It was a simple conversation, but it was there in that moment that they both realized what they felt was no longer fear, passion, or debt. It was love. real love. The kind that dismantles pride, melts lies, and builds something new on the rubble of pain. Silver Rock was still small, but it was no longer the town where everyone hid. It was the place where Thomas and May chose to stay, where they became a reference for something possible: redemption. A story that, although it began with pretense, ended with the truth stuck in the chest. And to anyone who asked, May always said, "Love is not what finds you ready. Love is what fixes you." On the last night before autumn arrived, Thomas surprised May. He took her to the old saloon, now renovated and lit by soft lamps. In the center of the wall, hung carefully, was the red dress, and below it, a plaque. Here danced a woman who conquered fear. She didn't cry, she just smiled. Because now she knew that even clothes can carry stories of strength when worn by those who chose to be free. This isn't just the story of a man who pretended to be a cowboy, or a woman who ran away with a stolen dress. It's the story of how life, no matter how crooked and dusty it may seem, can still surprise you. You can still deliver in the middle of the desert exactly what your heart needs, even in unexpected ways. Because sometimes truth comes disguised as a lie, and salvation comes disguised as error. May and Thomas show us that there is no past so dirty that it cannot be washed away with courage, that no one is only what others say, and that, deep down, we all carry a red dress, a mark of what we try to hide. But when we choose to stop running away, when we choose to be truly seen, even what shames us can become a banner of freedom. If this story touched your heart, I invite you not to let it die here. Share this video is about someone who needs to remember that there is still time to start over. Subscribe to the channel to hear other stories like this one. Stories that heal, that move, that rescue what is most beautiful in us. Comment here where you're watching from, because I read each comment with care. It shows me that words still have power. And remember, it doesn't matter how you started. What matters is what you do with what life has given you. May ran away in a saloon dress. Thomas fooled the world with a false name. But together, they found what we all seek, a place where we can be who we are, and still be loved for it. See you in the next story. Until then, don't be afraid to strip away the lies. True love always recognizes the truth behind the disguises.